YouTube, welcome as well, and also our Zoom slide tutorial, just in case you need any reminders as we go through our program today. And I am Martha Fisk, and I am on the education staff here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. And again, I am being joined by our special guest today, Dr. Robert Pollock. And I'm going to introduce you again in just a moment. But here, let's go through our Zoom tutorial slides as our reminder. So we have the view for the best way for you to be able to view your program. And so we also have closed captioning available today. And so you can see all of the little arrows directing you to where you need to go to be able to see that. And in order to be able to see Dr. Pollock while he is talking, you can select side-by-side mode and speaker view. And then we love to hear from you in the chat. So please share your comments and your questions with us. We will be saving our questions today until the very end. But please do share them throughout as they come up, and we'll make sure that we ask those questions for you. And we are so thankful today for our sponsors for the Triangle SciTech Expo, for the North Carolina Science Festival, and for the Biogen Foundation for supporting our programs and helping us to make this day possible. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can, and we will we can introduce now our guest speaker. So I have many screens open today. So I'm navigating around as well. So we are so excited. So Dr. Robert Pollock has his PhD in biosystems engineering. And after 30 years working in tree nurseries, plant tissue culture labs, and lumber kilns, he is now focused on facilitating climate change mitigation. And we are very excited to hear what you have to share with us today. So thank you so much for joining us. And you can, I think I stopped sharing my screen, so you should be able to share yours as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Am I sharing my screen now?
You are, yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay, hi, I'm Robert Pollock, and I'm going to be providing an overview here with a climate action plan. At the end, there is a list of 8 if I can get it to go to, there will be a list of 8 sustainable steps for a sustainable future. And before that, I'm going to be giving some background, describing the nature of the problem, some ways of viewing the scale of the issues, and then trying to put together what needs to be done with some background. So what is the problem? Last year, many of you may remember that there were some fires in the panhandle of Florida that closed I-10. And this was especially meaningful to me because a few years earlier, I lived in Brevard, and smoke from the fires there at the were in my home and across the border in Tennessee and Pigeon Forge. And when there's a drought in the forest, it's quite disconcerting. The issue really is that a warmer air will retain more water, and that both increases drought with less frequent rain while making extreme storms more severe. What we're experiencing here with hurricanes in the summer especially is that we had dry winds with dust going out over the South Atlantic that then turn into this cyclic storms or hurricanes that we're only too familiar with. You may remember Florence only a few years ago was a historic storm with 28 flood records across North and South Carolina. And one of the more memorable parts of that was the extreme amount of flooding that took place around Wilmington. So the cause of this is the increase in several different varieties of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. But the one that's easiest to track is carbon dioxide. And these measurements are in the Mauna Loa Observatory in the middle of the Pacific Ocean because Hawaii is pretty much isolated from the rest of the world, being out there in the ocean the way it is. And so they can provide a relatively undisturbed track. If we were to measure this near a production facility on the mainland in this country or China or anywhere else, the graph would not be nearly this smooth. And this is the track of 4 different entities that are attempting to determine the temperature of the planet. NASA, Hadley, NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic Institute, and Berkeley. There are many others, but the tracks are very close together. And in our own personal experience, anyone who has a garden that's been growing azaleas or jasmine especially, I've noticed that we find ourselves on the cusp of really moving from hardiness zone 7 to zone 8 here, where a Confederate jasmine didn't used to be able to be grown here, now seems to be doing fairly well in my yard. So this one thing we have to realize about this wonderful, beautiful earth that we live on is that it's mostly water. And we are bringing this heat to the planet with the man-made pollution, 93% of the new heat is being trapped in the water because water just has a great heat potential. And that's doing good things for us, and it's also doing bad things. But it is slowing down the degree to which we're experiencing the temperature change on land, even though it's accelerating the changes that we're seeing, especially in the Arctic. And the reason northern Arctic is being affected more drastically than the Antarctic is because there's more ocean in the southern hemisphere of our precious planet and more land area in the northern hemisphere. And this affects several different tipping points that most people are familiar with, but perhaps are not aware that how they interact with each other. And for example, the burning of the rainforest in Brazil, along with both the ice melts in Antarctica and the summer melt in Greenland and the Arctic, are all affecting the Gulf Stream, slowing it down, changing its course, and that affects other changes so that any of these tipping points, as we get to higher temperatures in the global temperature rise, are likely to cause permanent change. It'll be very difficult to reverse from and recover our current habitat. So how big is the overall problem? Because this is a global wide issue, and it's hard to conceive of the how much change we need to make, and what's the scale of the change that's needed. And this was very nicely presented by Dr. Arun Jandar, who was in the Obama administration, is currently now under Biden, the head of Advanced Research Project Agency. And he's asked the question, what are the significance of these 5 very generalized numbers that you see to the left of the screen? First, 1 degree C is actually 1.2, but for the purpose of trying to deal with round numbers to get a clear picture of the overall situation, 1 degree is approximately the rise in temperature of our planet above the pre-industrial environments. 2 degrees C is the Paris limit, and 800 gigatons of CO2 is the budget that we have. We can pollute the Earth 800 gigatons more than it is right now. In order to, if we don't go over the 800 gigaton limit, then we may be able to limit the temperature rise to 2 degrees C. And a gigaton is a billion tons. It's hard to think of the air that we're in as a substance with that much weight. If we were to add up the weight of 7.8 billion people that are the population of the Earth today, our total mass of all human beings would be half of 1 gigaton. So it's a lot of weight. The atmosphere, of course, is several miles deep and it's 8,000 miles across the diameter of the Earth. So we're living in quite a large volume of air. 40 is the approximate number, the pollution that was put into the world, into the atmosphere by the world in 2018. And I think it was actually 38 point something, but 40 is a nice round number that gives us a little bit of room for calculations, and these are so general. You divide 800 by 40 and you get 20 years left. That's not a lot. And if you go to the carbon clock in Berlin, they're actually giving us 24 to get to 2 degrees, 24 and a half, and allowing us a little bit larger budget. But I encourage everyone to keep track of the carbon clock here. And it's an easy site to find. So that brings us to this confusing slide, but this is the slide of the all of the different models to try to project where we're going and try to understand where we've been. And we're right now at the little white dot on the red line that's approximately across from the 40 gigatons of emissions. And as you can see, we're not on the nice blue line at the bottom of the chart. In fact, we're probably following a trajectory, closer to the red line. There is some hope that we're more horizontal than this. This is a publication from February from the Energy Information Agency, taking the perspective of the previous administration. You can see the projections here are all horizontal in terms of the sectors: transportation, industrial, electrical, and that really can't be. Fortunately, today, President Biden committed to have the emissions by 2030. And so that will be, and that is exactly what we need to be doing, if not better. Another recent report by the Human Development, it was called the Human Development Report from the United Nations, and it was published here only about 3 weeks ago, but it gave us about 30 years before the red areas would become very difficult for human habitation. So what can we do? We first of all need to realize that the population of the United States is less than 5% of the overall population of the world. And yet at the same time, we've been using up to 25%, but are now closer to 20% of the energy use. And referring to the Human Development Index as graphed against per capita power consumption, you can see the U.S. is near the top, where we would like to be, near the top of the Human Development Index. But unfortunately, a large percentage of the energy that we're using is currently from fossil fuels. We can see that other countries in this area, Norway and Iceland, use a lot more energy, but both of them are within 90% of the way to getting to being totally self-sufficient on renewables. So it's possible for us as well, although Norway has the advantage of a lot of elevated land for hydro, and Iceland is using both hydro and geothermal. The United Arab Republics and Qatar are coming along, 20% solar for each, whereas we're less than 1% so far overall as a country. So there's a lot that we can learn from our other countries that are around us. We've also have, a right to feel very good about what we've done that's gotten us this far with developing the technologies that we have had. But now we need to apply our ingenuity to solving the problem that fossil fuels have created. Let's see. And I'd just like to give a little moment's recognition here to Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was the Prime Minister of Norway, also a medical doctor graduating from Harvard Medical School. And she led the UN Sustainable Development Commission when it was founded. And her definition of sustainability was the development is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In 2016, the UN upgraded to accept these 17 different goals for development with emphasis on attacking poverty, hunger, global health, and education. And right now, I guess with COVID, we're seeing the importance of global health needing to vaccinate the entire world in order to extinguish the COVID-19. And we're also at a point where the population of the world could either continue to rise or it can begin to level off. And there's a lot of hope that we've already seen some early signs of leveling off due to outreach to the developing world. And but a great deal needs to be done along those lines. So the number 7 in the goals of the UN is affordable clean energy for everyone. And this montage that we're looking at here shows everywhere on Earth that that has electricity. Places that are not illuminated at night obviously either don't have electricity or there's no one living there, or both. But not for just for as a general comment, everyone should know that this is not actually the world at night. If it were, we'd be in trouble. That only half of the globe is illuminated and is shown in the upper right-hand corner. So how is this divided into the different sectors of our economy? And globally, electricity, agriculture, transportation, and industry are the 4 major units, with buildings and other taking up less than 10%. In the industrial sector, there are many decarbonizing innovations that are on the verge of being commercialized. This is one that is one of the most hopeful for making steel. Steel presently in the Bessemer process of making steel from coke, which is derived from coal, represents between 8 and 9% of the total emissions for all emissions from humanity from year to year. And if we were able to adopt this method of making steel through electrolysis, made possible with a breakthrough in electrode development at MIT, we can take a process that represents almost 1/10 of the problem to 0 emissions. The challenge with this and similar less developed progress in concrete is trying to, bring into established industries technologies that are new and completely different from what is currently being done. In the United States, the pie chart's just a little bit different, with a lot more emphasis on transportation because of Henry Ford and Eisenhower's highway system and all the great things that we've done with transportation. Also, the US contributed a great deal in both AC and DC in the development of the early electric grids. So to get to transportation, we need to go total electric for cars, trucks, and commuter trains. Once we get to this transition, I think we're going to wonder why it took us so long, because acceleration with electric motors is almost instantaneous, and braking can be done with direct generation of putting charge back into the batteries, and batteries can be used as a supplemental energy source, and it's just more efficient. If you were to take either the gasoline or the ethanol that we put into cars today and make electricity with it, and put the electricity into the cars, we get a considerably the electric car will go much further on the same amount of energy. So the cost of solar is new, and the cost of solar has come down drastically in the last 4 years. This is the levelized cost of for the solar cells themselves. Wind is a little less, because each windmill is about a megawatt per windmill on land, and 10 megawatts for the offshore, and there's just so much more to windmills. But the thing to realize about both wind and solar is, even though there have been varieties of wind and solar around for centuries, what we're using now is really brand new. And its main advantage over other forms of creating electricity is that it goes directly, or going directly from work in the atmosphere, where wind is an indirect source of solar power due to the movement in the atmosphere. And nuclear, which is still essential, is slightly more expensive, but that's a good thing, because that's for safety factors. It still has some outstanding issues, such as spent fuel rods that need to be dealt with, but we're fortunate to have it at its current state of development, and hopefully they'll be making improvements with it. And even in our children's generation, fission may be replaced by fusion, which is, they're making great strides at bringing that into the commercial reality. Even though in the future, I think that nuclear power is going to be limited to primarily supporting heavy industry like steel and concrete. So the making of the solar panels themselves is not the only cost factor, and the economics of scale in a utility size installations saves a lot in terms of the overall efficiency. And in North Carolina, we're fortunate to be one of the top 10 states as producers of electricity, and we have a lot more solar than most. Wind needs to come online, has been unfortunately held back by various elements that are opposed to it. But I think offshore wind, especially floating offshore wind, will get it far enough, away from the coast, and also allow windmills that need to be maintained, to be brought into port, to be maintained will be two major steps forward. However, we see that we still have 70% coal and 34% natural gas, which need to be replaced as soon as possible. Replacing the natural gas can be done with clean hydrogen. The company has just recently come online, and they're located in California with a process that strips the hydrogen away from carbon of methane, but the carbon then, instead of remaining as carbon dioxide, or instead of being carbon dioxide, is removed as a solid. And so solid carbon is an excellent material for construction, and it is not a contributor to emissions. So that is the process that we really need to have hope for development. Until recently, North Carolina was second to California in solar installations, which is something we can be proud of. I think Texas has just caught up, but I think that, and since we only have 7%, we need to move to 50% in renewables. We should press on and do whatever we can to increase our share. This was one of the first solar utility farms. It was Dogwood Solar down by Halifax. One of the changes that I would personally like to see is spacing of collectors and putting them on separate supports, because this allows not only the collectors to be oriented optimally, but also allows for multiple land use, including vegetable gardening underneath, which is one of my favorite pastimes. It can also be used on farms for sheds and other areas that we allow grass to grow underneath. And both of these, the wind and solar, can end up being a very nice economic supplement to farms. They're designed so that both agriculture and energy needs are taken into account, and it provides a kind of a background for steady supplementary income for the farming community that will be needing to cope with ever increasing unreliability and inconsistency in the weather as we go forward. Solar does need temporary storage. The hydro in North and South Carolina is among the best, but we've pretty much used up most of the areas that are capable. And whenever a pumped hydro installation is installed, it always has a high cost of environmental damage to flooding beautiful streams and taking up areas with habitat. This is the Lake Jocassee in South Carolina that also is nearby another pumped hydro project near Clemson University. So other storage methods are coming on that will have similar capabilities. This one is thermal storage of high temperatures from molten salts, which can be fed either from photovoltaics, winds, or CSP is concentrated solar power. The high temperature of the bulk of the media actually doesn't need nearly as much insulation as you would think, because when the storage volume becomes sufficiently large, the only heat loss is from the exterior surface, and the ratio of surface to volume is usually very friendly to a large volume. The temperature then allows the heat to be returned to steam, either through turbines, as is shown here, or through other methods that are newer and a little more efficient. And it can then be returned to the grid for power as needed. And the whole world of batteries is being turned on its head. Lithium-ion batteries have gone through so many improvements that it's hard to keep up recently. But in addition to that, this is a picture of Don Satterway from MIT, who has come up with a liquid metal battery that has storage capacity and installed economics that are similar to pumped hydro. Well, I guess the thing that really is nearest and dearest to my interest is, what do trees contribute? And I guess one of the main points of this presentation is that while we cannot count on trees alone to solve the problem for us, we need to better understand what trees and all photosynthetic vegetation really contributes to our solving the climate crisis. And this is a sort of a busy diagram. It's a little hard to follow, but it's in a lot of the EPA documents, and it is a depiction that shows the role of photosynthesis both in land through trees and field crops, but also in the ocean through plankton and all of the plant material is seaweeds in the ocean. The ocean is probably best left alone because it's international waters. There's a lot that we can do with land, and the main concern is clearing land that doesn't really need to be cleared. Photosynthesis is such an amazing process. We all tend to take it for granted, but it is the one natural process that actually takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and attaches the carbons together in strings of sugar that then become part of the food chain for the rest of everything else that lives on Earth today. And the main advantage of this, if we are able to increase the surface area in trees, especially, is to give us a negative CO2 emissions to counteract or to complement the reductions that we absolutely need to make in the emissions of carbon dioxide as an effluent from our electrical, industrial, transportation processes. Unfortunately, we're losing a lot of trees. The vast majority are being cut and burned in Brazil. We absolutely have to make this the last year of that destructive clear-cutting process. Democratic Republic of Congo on the other continent in Africa is not as severe, but it's moving in the same direction. Indonesia is making a lot of progress. Bolivia and Peru are on the western edge of the Amazon. Just a shout out to the World Resource Institute that does a great job of keeping track of this issue. And in addition to trees, wetlands, which we have many wonderful wetlands along our coast, need to be valued for an entirely new perspective. Not only do they provide buffering for storms, but they actually produce 10 times more carbon sequestration than mature tropical rainforests. So we have sea level rise approaching from one edge, and we have commercial development with people, trying to, build homes and shopping centers closer to the beach on the other. And somehow we need to compensate people for their losses, but we also need to realize that the wetlands are an extremely valuable resource that need to be built up and protected. Overall, the green squares in this chart should be reassuring, and that's where these are the areas that are growing trees. The silver areas are areas that are sort of in steady state. And then as you go to yellow and brown is where we're losing ground. We need to, I think, promote growing trees for lumber. Softwood, especially loblolly pine and longleaf pine are sort of the favorites, and you can see why with the harvest age at around 30, whereas the hardwood trees can take 60 to 90 years for the forest to get to full maturity. But part of the good news here is that North Carolina has twice as much land area in hardwoods as we have in pine, and what we need to realize is that, excuse me, the above ground portion of the trees that is harvested for wood products represents about 36% of the carbon. It's frequently harvested with clear cutting, which is done primarily to protect younger trees that are used to replant them so that they are not shaded when they're trying to get established. But while this is necessary, initially to get some crops in the ground, it's not the only way to harvest trees. We can certainly harvest trees with narrower access roads, and the part of the trick there is learning how to economically harvest the hardwoods and rely on the hardwoods, which for many years in North Carolina has supported the furniture and cabinet industries. Excuse me. NASA is helping in this area with developing new methods for evaluating land use. And this is possibly being able to be combined with evaluation or rewarding people who are able to do natural control of the land. So we can possibly get carbon credits to be another supplement to people who are able to do natural methods for land management. And the result can be really very rewarding. And we need to realize that this is a particular wonderful picture, I think, because it shows the result of cross-laminated timbers where we can use smaller caliper trees, by which I mean 2 feet in diameter, as opposed to old growth, which is 3 or more feet in diameter. But by cross-lamination, we're able to get timbers out of them that we can use them as a structural element that can replace steel and concrete. And this is also realized that this is fixed carbon. This is carbon out of the woods, which has not been destroyed. That is for the 100 years that it may be in the buildings we incorporated. So where do we start? And this is the conclusion to my talk. The first thing we need to do is really stop mining coal and pumping oil and replace natural gas with hydrogen. We need to electrify all of our vehicles as quickly as possible. Maximize wind and solar. and to my mind, to do it in a way that's as farm friendly as possible. We'll need a new smart grid for reasons I didn't go into, but the large scale renewable storage is going to need to be a big part of it, and that will also help in smoothing the distribution and avoiding brownouts and all the other issues in managing the grid. Decarbonize steel and concrete, make buildings green and efficient, support farms practicing low carbon agriculture, and plant as many trees as possible. And with that, I'd like to conclude with a quote from Martin Luther King that is probably familiar to everyone. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We're confronted with the fierce urgency of now, unfolding conundrum of history. There really is such a thing as being too late. And that is the end of my talk.
Thank you. So we do have some questions that I've been saving that I'd be happy to share if you like.
Great.
Okay. And we can also share. You can stop sharing your screen if you would like, or you can keep it open in case you.
Okay, I can stop sharing.
Okay.
There.
Okay, so and I'm sorry, I apologize for the echo. I'm not sure why.
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. I have an echo.
Okay, let me. Dr. Pollock, do you mind muting yourself off a minute and see what help? It might be.
Your sound is a little bit unclear.
Yes. That we have bad. So I will try and mute myself. That helps. Terry, do you want to try and talk for a minute, or Nancy?
Okay, and do you have the questions for me? Do you have?
I can jump in.
Okay.
Is my audio okay?
Yes.
And Martha shaking her head.
Okay. Your voice is clear to me.
Your voice is clear to me, Robert. But Martha and but my voice sounds echoing, as does Martha's. Nancy,
Okay.
do you want to try jumping in?
Sure. Is this better? Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, good.
But it's echoing for us, though. Is it echoing for you, Robert?
No, it's not echoing for me.
Oh, interesting. Somebody might have to do them too. Okay. I'll let Nancy. We'll just continue then if it's just Carrie. So, okay. Thank you for your patience. So our first question from Steve, and the good question has just completed the critique of Biden plan to the CO2 50% by 2030. And Greta argues that science costs zero by 2020. What is your opinion on this?
Well, I think it's overdue and it's absolutely urgent. We know in my view, it's the minimum, and I know it's hard because it means change. It means drastic change, but it's something that we have to do as rapidly as possible. And here's why: because every ton of CO2 that we prevent going into the atmosphere at this stage in development may cost us somewhere between $20, $40 a ton for whatever change that we have to make to prevent that from happening. But if we kick the can down the road and go as slow as we possibly can, the carbon dioxide has an unfortunate way. It doesn't precipitate, so it stays in the atmosphere hundreds of years. And as because it's fairly thin gas with still having a large effect, and methane is the same way. It's very expensive to get them out of the atmosphere later on. So our grandchildren will be paying thousands of dollars probably to get the CO2 and methane out of the atmosphere later. So that's why it's imperative for us to do as much as we can as rapidly as possible.
Thank you. And Robert, do you mind trying to mute your sound to see if we're echoing?
Yes, so how my sound is better?
Yes, I'll let you talk, Hugo.
Okay, so let me go back to the questions. So, what effect does solar have on birds? Does the reflection affect their flight pattern? Can you hear me?
So Robert, I think it was your sound that was echoing, so I muted you. If you can unmute, you'll be able to talk again.
It was my sound that was echoing? Okay, I'm sorry about that. So you've got the problem solved now? So birds are, as far as I know, not terribly confused by solar. I even have some problems with birds flying into my sliding glass doors on my patio, but I think that the fact that the panels have a lot of striations and other features to them, that if they're oriented in the right direction, they shouldn't be that much of an issue.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question from Robert. Said, as an engineer, what is your feeling about whether engineers are open to change or more likely to resist change?
I have to keep muting and unmuting you, Robert. I apologize. I'll just remember you.
Okay, that's fine. Just keep letting me know if I forget. Yeah, engineers are like everybody else. They come in all stripes. I guess the most common feature is for everyone to want to keep doing what they've been doing. And the situation right now is that we need to change. The one takeaway that I have from Don Sadoway is that invention is really key to engineering. And so if we really take to heart, now most people who get an engineering degree don't have the ability to actually practice it in a developmental format. But I think that if we reach down into the basics of our original education, that we can find stimulation there to make the change that's needed.
Mm-hmm. And North Carolina has had many incentives to change to solar. So if everyone changes to that option, how will this integrate with the current grid? Wait a second, you're muted.
The most economic way to do solar is going to be in large arrays, and that's why I think that they're best done in combination with agriculture, on large farms and in ways that allow multi-use of the land, which is the big drawback for solar that isn't done, so that other things can be, activities can take place underneath it, the panels. But that is so there are many advantages to running solar through the grid. Grid tie systems are really best even for, because you don't have to spend so much on individual batteries, and the best batteries for solar are going to be different configurations in the future anyway. So I think the grid tie system is best. I think the utility scale is the most economical, and the grid needs to be smarter and needs to have more storage. But I think that everything will run smoother if we can make those developments.
We have another question from Carrie. So that she said, so near my house, they clear cut a forest to install a solar farm. I feel like there are better ways to install solar. Is there work being done in North Carolina to perhaps require solar on all new builds like in California?
I would think that would be a great idea. I think that solar can do a lot on especially flat roof industrial commercial buildings. I think otherwise the normal black roof that we put on there is not helping anything. But yes, I think that would be a great idea.
And Stanton wants to know how we can make grids smarter.
So the smart grid is to involves a lot more with the controls and with the integration of control with large scale storage. But the other part of it too is a lot of it needs to be underground, or it needs to be done through high speed conduit. So there is a lot of work to be done that has been done theoretically. I believe that the utilities have been thinking about this for a while, and I think everyone will be better off. It's an investment that needs to be made.
Mm-hmm. And I have a personal question. If you can give an advice to people, one thing that they should do, if it's even just one thing to save the planet, what will be your advice or your suggestion?
I would think that appreciating the green leaf and just what happens in photosynthesis, because it is really, truly amazing what happens that we take for granted because we eat salads every day and we're around leaves all the time, but we don't. It's just phenomenal what's actually happening in the series of photosynthesis. One thing that I would really like people to be more familiar with is, not to make this too long an answer, but the difference between chlorophyll and hemoglobin is they're more remarkably close in a chemical structure. The center of chlorophyll is a single atom of magnesium surrounded by 4 nitrogen atoms, and then the rest of this a large cluster of 360 more carbons with hydrogen and oxygen. And hemoglobin, which carries the oxygen in our blood, is almost exactly the same, except the atom in the center of it is iron. And the iron in that case is surrounded by 4 nitrogens, which is then connected to this very large carbohydrate. So the understanding how wonderful life is, how important plants are, and to just grow as many plants as you can.
Mm-hmm. And my last question is, one challenge is the accessibility of battery charging stations in each city. So how are the cities planning for this, and what can be done to make the cost of electric vehicles more affordable?
Well, I think the cost of batteries is coming down dramatically. The more they're made and the more they are developed, that will happen by itself. But the challenge, as the questioner points out, is to get the charging stations out in the community, and to it may be a bit of a challenge there to have them adapted. I know I've seen a number of small motels that have been putting up Tesla charging stations, and that's really what needs to happen. Is the companies need to take it upon themselves to find a program that will help them with the cost of putting the charging stations, because once they're available, then the anxiety of running out of power with an all-electric vehicle will be far less.
Okay, so thank you very much. So for everybody, we will stay here hours and hours talking with Robert, but we don't have much time, so I have to wrap up. So first of all, Robert, thank you so much for being with us today. As I told you before that we met, I love the way that you share your passion, and that is contagious. So it is great always just to hear from you. And thank you, Martha, for hosting this program. Thank you, everybody, for attending. But we are not finished. We have more programs today, tomorrow, and Saturday. So this is not the end. So go to our website, naturalsciences.org, and check out the rest of our programs. And thank you, Biogen Foundation and the North Carolina Science Festival for sponsoring this event. And thank you, members of Friends of the Museum, because without you, these programs couldn't be like this one, which is great. And of course, if you go to our website, you can check out our virtual escape room. Are you be able to escape from the genomics lab? You can go there and play right now. So again, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, everybody, and happy Earth Day. Bye.
Thank you.